Interested in learning how you can turn our FNC chart into the chart for your application with your look and feel? Then this video is for you, as we will show the various options for customizing the look and feel of our FNC chart. We'll show you or guide you through the visual flexibility that we have with customizing the x-axis, y-axis legends, how you can use color schemes, the Excel color scheme, custom color schemes, how you can customize background and deal with fonts, how you can also apply markers to series custom markers, and how you can also use the visual editors at runtime. We'll also show you how you can control the layout of our chart, how you can use the horizontal and vertical mode, for example. And finally, we'll also uncover a little bit how you can take advantage of the built-in animation options and how you can do a dynamic customization of the look and feel of your chart by implementing event handlers in our FNC chart. And that, of course, with our FNC chart that you can use in a VCL application, as the component fits nicely into the VCL framework, but also at the same time it also works in the FireMonkey framework, and on top of that also for building web client applications with the TMS WEB Core framework and Delphi. And with that, our FNC chart can be used for different targets. That includes Windows, macOS, iOS, Android, Linux, and also web clients, and any modern browser can run on any kind of device or targets these days from a web client. So let's waste no more time and let's dive into the Delphi 13 IDE, where I will show you all of these customization capabilities for look and feel of our FNC chart right out of the IDE. So here we are in Delphi 13 IDE with the FNC chart just dropped on the main form with its default settings, and of course, as you can do with any Delphi component, you can customize it from the object inspector, where you find all the properties relevant to this component. And if you would want to change, for example, the appearance, you find it under the appearance property, and here are its different appearance settings. Same applies for things like the legends. You can find it in the object inspector, or let's say title, that is here. You can customize everything from there. The chart has a series, and the series can be edited by invoking the collection editor for the series. But we made it somewhat more convenient for you to do all these customizations by double-clicking at design time on our FNC chart, and from there the FNC chart design time editor is invoked, from where you can control the type of the chart that you want to show, the appearance of the background of our chart, the appearance, position, layout, and colors of our legend in the chart, the title of the charts, the x-axis here below the chart, and also the y-axis left and right here in this example, and at last also the different property settings for each of the series in our chart. Let's go to chart type, and here you see that the line chart has been chosen. I can make it a stack chart, a bar chart, and so on. All these different types can be selected from here. Next is the appearance, that is mainly the background of our chart, where I can change the background color, and I can give it a gradient color by selecting a second color like this, and of course then I need to set kind to gradient, and you can see the gradient background here in our design time chart. Border colors are set here with the stroke property. You see the outer border now in red, and I can also give the opacity a different value here from our editor, so to make our FNC chart semi-transparent on this form. Let's have a look at what we can customize in the legend. The legend that is shown by default here in the top left corner. We can change the layout and give it another position like this. We can of course also change the background color of our legend, and we can change the font that is used in the legend and give it some offset from its position, make it also invisible. All of these things we can change via the legend properties here in our chart editor. And that brings us to title. The title of the chart is what you can see here at the top. It's enabled at the top. I can remove it from the top, set it at the bottom, for example. And I can also give this title area a different background color, something like this. And I need to select solid, and then you can see the solid background color chosen for the title area in our chart. And I can set the title of the title itself. I can set it with alignment of the title, all from here, including the font. Let's make it somewhat bigger, and you can see all the things change WYSIWYG at design time from our chart editor. X-axis. The x-axis is what you see here at this moment at the bottom of the chart. Also here you can control the position of this x-axis at the bottom, top, etc. And you can also control the background color and the stroke color for this x-axis area. When we select, for example, the center position for the x-axis, we have a duplicate of the x-axis, and here you can also control where exactly you want to have that duplicate of the x-axis on our chart. And pretty much the same applies for the y-axis. Here, of course, it is either left, right, or both left, right. We can have also a duplicate y-axis somewhere positioned in our chart at the position of our choice. And this y-axis area can also get its own background color to make it very apparent or clear where this y-axis is. You can do it like that. And last but not least, we have access to the series. So the series is giving us access to each of the individual series in our chart. We can pick the selected series here from this drop down. We have default 3 series initialized, and from here you can add and remove series in this chart. So we pick the series of choice, and from there we can do further customizations that apply specifically here to this series. So we have control over the legends. If we want to have a different value, for example, we can set it from here, and it is shown in the legend of the chart. We can also specifically change the type of this series, so that is a per series selection of the chart type that we want. And so we can mix, of course, this way different types of series within our chart. The labels of our series, so that is the numbers that are or can be shown on the positions here in each of the series points. And we can select for these labels also different colors, like this, for example. We can see here the labels with a bluish background and a white font, for example. We can change the font size. So we can do pretty much everything. We can also play with the transparency of these labels. So we can do pretty much everything with the labels on our series. Markers, we have here by default the ellipse marker. You can change it to diamond marker, for example, and you can see here now on this first series, this area series, the diamond shaped markers on each of the points in this series. And we can also change the size of these markers, increasing the size. You can see the triangles becoming larger, and of course I can also change the background color of these markers. Let's give it some specific color like green that is immediately noticeable. Here you can see the markers on my chart. That brings us to the X grid, and we also have the Y grid. So that is actually the background, and maybe I give it a more noticeable color. So we have here the X grid and the Y grid, and I can also turn both off. You can control both the color, stroke, and whether the X grid and Y grid are visible or not. The X values, these are the values that sit here in the X axis. Notice that we have here in this particular example only for the first series the X axis values visible. That is because we assume that in this chart each of the series share a common X axis. If we choose the second series, you can see that this position is unchecked everywhere. If I go to series null, you can see that it is enabled, so the values or the X-axis values are displayed for my first series in this list of series. The series has tick marks along the X-axis, and we can control font and tick mark color, tick mark size. All of these things we can control it from this editor, as well as the value or the text in the X-axis. So these, let's say these are the sales numbers here, or rather this would be months. We can change it here in the title for this X-axis. And if there is a need, we can of course have multiple X-axis for each of the series and have different values with different tick marks, etc. for each of our series. Let's go to the Y values, and it's pretty much the same as for the X values. Here we have a typical chart that has for each of the series the same range of values for the Y-axis. That's why we have them enabled for the first series, we have them disabled for the second and the last series. And so customization goes through this first series where it is visible, and also here we have major and minor tick marks, major and minor labels where you can control the different font for different types of the ticks along the Y-axis. And we can also control the formatting of the values. For example, if we would change it to this format, you can see that the decimals are removed. And we can also change the value, the text value for this Y-axis via this title property. And then some type specific visual properties that are settings that are specific to some chart types like pie, bar, and multi-point. And here, for example, for a bar chart is a common difference in how you want the bar to render. That is that the value for each point in the bar chart contains a percentage number or an absolute or a pixel-based value. You can change that, select that so that the chart renders as you expected. So all of these visual settings are available via this design time chart editor. So let's have a look at how we can bring all these pieces of the puzzle together in a application where we also control the chart settings programmatically. Here we have a default chart on the form, and the first thing I want to show you is the difference between handling color lists in the FNC charts. Color list, what is it? It is a list of consecutive colors that the chart will use depending on the chart type. If we talk about, for example, line charts or bar charts, that is the color that is automatically picked up for the first series, then the second series, third series, and so on. By default, the FNC chart has a Excel compatible color list that is applied to each of the series colors, of pie chart colors, and so on. On top of that, we can also define our own color list, and so that is the list of colors that each of the series will pick up as series are added on the chart. And to make that visible, here we set the selected color list by the appearance.colorScheme property, and we simply set it to Excel, and that means that our color list will be filled with a compatible list of colors compatible with how Excel will render these. We can have a custom color list, and this is the part of the code that is responsible for initializing that. We have the color list and fill it in this case with 10 custom colors, and we can specify the color scheme as a color list, and then our custom chosen colors will be applied to our FNC chart. To see this in action, let's run this application, and we have the default initialized sample of 3 series. When we set it to Excel colors, you can see that each of the series colors was changed and picked up from the default Excel colors that are used. When I set it to custom colors, you can see that, for example, here the first series picked up the red color, the second series the steel blue color, and the third series the orange color. And so that's how you can work with these color lists and initialize these once, and each of your chart setups with different number of series will all have nice recognizable series. Let's have a look at some further customization, and that is here in this piece of code. And the goal here is that we added 2 series. One of the series is an area series, and the other is a bar series. What we do here is we set the legend text, so these will be the month sales, and that will be the profit percentage per month. And then here we customize the range for our x-axis, so we don't want any x-axis scrolling or more values than can be fit. For example, we want that it automatically makes a range of 12 months, the sales of the year for each of the months. That's why we set minimum value to 0, maximum value to 11. For the y-axis, here we will use a common y-axis for the month sales number and the profit percentage, and that's why we set the auto y range to common 0 based, so it's a common y range, and it always starts at 0. Also, if every point value in a series would be higher than 0, it will still start from 0. And as we do not want that the maximum value will really stick to the top of the chart, we give it some offset from the top, and that is here 10% offset that we set here to show nicely in our chart. Here we set the mode to statistical, and that actually means that it is nicely distributed along each of the 12 months, as is commonly used for statistical charts, different from mathematical charts, which is also a possibility. But if you have a mathematical chart, then of course your x-axis will normally for mathematical use start at 0 and be nicely fit to the pixel value for the mathematical value of the x-axis, and so that's the difference here between statistical and mathematical. In this case, for showing sales, statistical is the way to go. We also bound this to a checkbox to enable the chart to render as 3D or not. And for our area chart, we set some background gradient color. Here you can see the start color and the end color of the gradient and the direction of the gradient. And we also set the border color for the area chart. And then here we add the point values to our series, the first series, the area series, and this is here picked up from a numbers array initialized with random values, and the x-axis text value for each of these series points is simply referring to the name of the month. And the second series is quite similar, only it is a bar chart. And here for the bar chart, what we do is we also add a label so that we see that percentage. And first thing that I will do is add also markers, but make it diamond markers. So we set the marker shape for this bar series to diamond. We want it to be yellow diamonds, and this is the size of the diamond that will be displayed. I will also here explain a little bit how points are added. So the profit obviously is larger than the total revenue, and that's why I create this kind of random calculation for the profit of each of the 12 months. Animation is also bound to a checkbox, and so to start an animation, here in this case on the bar chart, so the area chart will be static, the bar chart will be animated. So when this checkbox is checked, I control here the speed of the animation. Animation flow is false. That means that each of the points in my series will animate at the same time, whereas when I would set animation flow to true, it would animate through each of the points in my series. And then finally I trigger the animation by calling series.animate. Let's see the result in action of this initialization of my chart. And so when I click sales chart, this is the result. When I click it again, I get just different random values. You can see the gradient background in my area chart, and you can see here the yellow diamond. What we see here is that some of the series are shown with a lime colored background, and that is handled through dynamic customization of the bar chart color. And let's jump to the code from where that is happening. At the same time, for my next run, I will change my markers to use the bitmap markers. So bitmap markers are set here with the shape property. Size is somewhat larger, and the marker itself is coming from a PNG file that has a small $sign that will be visible when I run my application next. But coming back to the dynamic bar chart color customization, I achieve this through the event onGetPoint. The event onGetPoint is triggered for every point of every series in my chart, and it passes that specific point and also a reference to the series, and from there I can do any customization that I want. Here in this case I will want to customize for my bar chart, so this is the second chart or second series in my chart, so it has index equal to 1, and when that value of the point is higher than 40, I want it to have a different color, the lime color that I set through point.color. And that's actually all there is to do to have this type of dynamic color initialization. So let's run it again. We can see now the markers that it picked up the PNG file for my marker, and you can see here the first two values happen to be higher than 40, so they are lime colored. And when I invoke it again with different random values, you can see everywhere where it's higher than 40. So one more thing here in this chart, or let's say two more things, that is customizing the background color. That is simply done by accessing the chart fill texture and specifying that the kind of texture here, the kind is texture actually. So when I run it and I set the background, you can see this nice beach background for my chart. What I can also change is the orientation of my chart to vertical or horizontal, and that is a global setting on my chart. So from here, when I click this radio group, you can see that I can simply change the orientation of my chart to vertical or horizontal. And that brings me to two more settings, the animation and 3D. So let's run this application. I will enable animation, select the sales chart, and now you can see that the bars have been animated from 0 to their actual value as I show the values on my chart. And 3D, when I enable that, you can see that in this case both series are rendered as 3D charts with that 3D effect here on area and on bar. And the final example here is the pie chart, and let's have a look at the code for initializing my pie series. Same applies here. I clear any prior series that might have been added, and I add a new series, the pie series. Let's say this is a distribution of fruits that people eat. That's why I set the legend text to fruits. And here we set or we make the labels visible on each of the pies in my pie chart. And we add some margin to the pie at the top and at the bottom. And why do we do that? That is because after we added some random pie chart values to this pie chart, we pick also a random pie to explode it, so to have it shown extracted from the pie. One of these pies will be extracted, and it is a random pie as I invoke it here for the random number between 0 and 9. And as I do this extraction of one of the pies, that extracted pie might take some more place either at the top of or the bottom of the chart, and that's why I add some margin to ensure that also the extracted pie nicely fits within my chart area. And so let's have a look when I run this. And okay, I click on pie chart, and you can see here also with animation, because I added here this animation also for the pie chart. You can see that it is rendered with animation on the form, and one of these pies is extracted my labels indicating the percentages are on the pies. And so when I would render it again, you see different random values. And also here the colors apply. When I would select the Excel colors and go to pie chart again, this is the Excel list of colors. When I now select custom colors and invoke the pie chart, you can now see that the different custom colors are selected for my pie chart. So these color lists apply to any type of charts that I select. So this was everything from a FireMonkey application. I could have done the same from a VCL application. And actually I will show you that I can also do exactly the same from a TMS WEB Core web client application, meaning that you can also use this for web applications with TMS WEB Core. So this is the main form of a TMS WEB Core application. And actually I duplicated the init sales chart method here in my WEB Core application. And as expected, it should of course render exactly the same way as it did render in my FireMonkey application. So let's activate this project and let's run it. It is now transpiling my code application and FNC chart code to JavaScript, and that JavaScript will run in the browser as a web client application. So here we have the default tree series in my chart, and when I click initialize, you can see that we have this combination of area chart and bar chart with the exact same colors as we had in our FMX application first shown. So also web applications with TMS WEB Core, fully developed with the Delphi programming language, can also take advantage of all our FNC chart capabilities. A lot of things to explore. You can discover everything from the trial version of our FNC chart component available for you. It's fully functional, and so you can dive into it and see for yourself how you can maximize its use and adapt it to your application and your needs. So go to our website, to the FNC chart page. You can download the trial from there. If you liked this video, don't forget to like here under this video. And if you want to see more content, simply subscribe to this channel and you will be notified of upcoming content. For now, thanks for your time. Thanks for watching, and don't forget, play with the FNC chart and enjoy its many capabilities. Thank you.